Uttama Purushastvanya Paramatmait Yudahritaha Yo Lokatrayam Avishya Bibarjavyaya Ishvaraha Uttamaha, the best. Purushaha, personality. Tu, but. Anyaha, another. Parama, the supreme. Atma, self. Iti, thus. Udahritaha, is said. Yaha, who. Loka, of the universe. Trayam, the three divisions. Avisya, entering. Bibarti, is maintaining. Avyayaha, inexhaustible. Ishvaraha, the Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Please repeat. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Purport. The idea of this verse is very nicely expressed in the Katha Upanishad 2.2.13 and Svetashvatara Upanishad 6.13. It is clearly stated that above the innumerable living entities, some of whom are conditioned and some of whom are liberated, there is the Supreme Personality, who is Paramatma. The Upanishadic verse runs as follows: Nicho Nichanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. The purport is that amongst all the living entities, both conditioned and liberated, there is one supreme living entity, the supreme living personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all facility of enjoyment according to different work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand Him is eligible to attain perfect peace, not others. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Maritam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandayaham Sri Guruho Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Guru Navaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrijatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Uttama Purushastvanya Paramaitmatyudahritaha Yo Lokatrayam Avisya Bibharatyavya Ishvaraha. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. So this verse says, besides these two. So these two were mentioned in yesterday's verse. Kshara and Akshara, the fallible and the infallible. So as Srila Prabhupada explained in the beginning of the purport yesterday, that these verses so Prabhupada's purport yesterday starts, as already explained, the Lord in His incarnation as Vyasadeva compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here the Lord is giving in summary the contents of the Vedanta Sutra. So these three verses from 15, 16, 17 and 18 are called the Trisloki Gita. And the significance is this. We have Chatusloki Gita, which is 10, 8, 9, 10 and 11, which is the summary of the essence of the Gita. And this Trisloki Gita, 15, 16, 17 and 18, is here because it is the summary of the Vedanta Sutra. So it's explaining in a nutshell the main philosophy of the Vedas. So because it's the summary of the Vedanta Sutra, it's been separated out as the Trisloki Gita. So these three, 16, 17 and 18, according to Bodhijan and Surrender unto me, represent Sambandha. The description in these three give our relationship with Krishna. So I'll just read the translations of the three so we can get them together. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So this describes living entities in the material world. We're conditioned, so we're described as fallible. Prabhu nicely explained yesterday how we become conditioned, how we're subject to temporary state and always miserable. And the liberated are the infallible. Today's verse, besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. And in tomorrow's verse, Krishna brings it into the first person, because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. So then Bodhijan goes on to say that the following verse, text 19, is the Abhideya, which means the process of devotional service. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. So if we know Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, we know everything. And not only knowing everything, in that case, if we know everything, we know Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we engage in devotional service. So that is similar to in our Chatusloki Gita, Verse 10.8, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarva pravartiti iti matbam bhavantimam Buddha bhava samanvita. The translation I might need to get for you. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So similarly here, this is our process. Once we know the relationship with Krishna, so here in this section it is even more clear. There are the fallible and the infallible, and the one who is controlling and maintaining and who is above everything is Krishna. So that gives our relationship. We are subordinate to Krishna, we are maintained by Krishna. In fact, all of this 15th chapter is establishing how we are maintained by Krishna. Through verses 12 through 15, Krishna says in so many ways how he maintains us. He is the fire of digestion. He provides the moonlight to give nourishment to the vegetables. He is the source of remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So like this section is all about how Krishna is our maintainer. And then once we know that, our abhideya, our process, is to engage in full devotional service. And then the last verse, according to Burijan, is our prayojan. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and is now disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So the prayojan will become wise, and our endeavors will know perfection. We will reach, Krishna says in so many other places, we will go back to him. So a significant thing about this 20th verse, Krishna is describing Arjuna as anaga. Anaga means sinless. So what this means is that to actually come to the stage of knowledge, we have to become sinless. We have to give up all our attachments. Now, this verse today is very significant. I did some research in relation to this Vedanta Sutra, because the Vedanta Sutra is giving us the essence, the sutra, which means it gives us, it's a way of getting us to the essence of the Vedas. And this verse, particularly today, it actually completely defeats Mayavad. So it's explained, yesterday's verse explained two classes of living entities, the fallible and the infallible. So the Mayavadi thinks he's in Maya now, and when he becomes purified, he will be liberated. So he can see the fallible and the infallible, and the fallible and the infallible, and he can say, okay, now I'm fallible. When I become perfect, I will become infallible, and I will become Brahman. So they take a shortcut. They want to go from being infallible, liberated, and think of themselves as supreme. So that's where this verse completely defeats Mayavad. Because although 16, simply describing the fallible and the infallible, could be seen to accept Mayavadi conclusion. Sometime we are conditioned and then we become liberated. But now there is Anya, there is another. And this Anya is Uttama Purushas, he's a supreme person. And the other thing that defeats the Mayavad is that this Anya, this supreme person, who is also Paramatma, he is maintaining everybody. Now, if the Mayavadi was going to go from Kshara to Akshara and become Brahman, then he wouldn't need anyone else maintaining him, because he would be God. So in this way, this verse defeats Mayavad, because above the infallible, there is a supreme person who is controlling and maintaining the other infallibles. So the other infallibles are not on the same level as him. So this is our the biggest danger for the Mayavadis, is they think they come to the same level as Krishna. So Prabhupada in the purport gives this verse from the Upanishads, Nicho Nichanam Chaitanas Chaitananam, which is a verse that he likes to quote very much. It means amongst all the eternals, there is one supreme eternal, and that he is maintaining them. Okay, so today's verse, Krishna is talking in the third person. He's saying, besides these two, there is another who is the Paramatma, who is the Supreme Lord. And tomorrow's verse, he comes back to the first person. I am that Supreme Person. I am that Supreme Lord. Now, the people commenting on that says that when he's talking in the third person, he's talking about the administration of the material worlds. And he's talking also out of humility. Because if he was always standing up saying, I am God, I am God, I am God, like all these false gods, then the mood is not there. Krishna is also humble, even though he is the greatest. Now, I found a very nice article by one of our devotees, which explains what this Mayavad actually is in terms that I could understand, so hopefully you can also follow. So Mayavad is actually a very broad term, because Maya means basically this matter in this material world, and Vadi means one who follows. So one who follows matter, one who puts something in this material world above what's transcendental, is a Mayavadi in broad terms. So that includes the impersonalists and the voidists, and it also includes the Shankarites. But there is another distinction. Where the Shankarites are really known as Mayavadis is because they have their own Mayavad philosophy. The impersonalists and the voidists simply lack knowledge. But beyond this, Prabhupada clearly distinguishes, although all these people, impersonalists, voidists and Mayavadis, all think they're transcendentalists, they're actually sense enjoyers. Their interest is for their own enjoyment. So he explains it like this. He says that when somebody who's a karmi is enjoying in this material world, after some time he gets frustrated. And he just says, okay, I'm going to renounce. So Prabhupada, I looked it up, I think there were many references to this story. Sometimes he calls it the fox and sometimes the jackal in the grape yard. So the jackal is trying to get some grapes, and he's jumping and jumping and jumping, but he can't quite reach the grapes. And so he gives up and says, well, the grapes were sour anyway, I don't want them. So he says this is like the jnani. He's trying to enjoy in the material world, and he can't enjoy. So then he says, well, the material world's false anyway, so there's no point in enjoying, it's false. So then he tries for Brahma Sukha. He tries for happiness in Brahman. But actually he will never attain that either, because he's looking for happiness. Brahma Sukha can only come when we give up desires for personal sense gratification. Because as long as we desire something, we're going to be dissatisfied. So they can't get Brahma Sukha because they're not qualified. So then they come down to material world again in a yo-yo cycle. They go up, they can't enjoy, they come down, they can't enjoy, they go up, they can't enjoy. So actually they're trying to find enjoyment, or they're trying to find peace. They're trying to find something. So Srila Prabhupada says that's why these Mayavadis have a tendency to come, when they come back down in the material world, they think, well, let me open some hospital, let me put some water supplies in the villages, let me look after these people who are suffering. Srila Prabhupada in a lecture in, that was a lecture in 1967 I was quoting for. This one is a lecture in 1972 in Vrindavan. He lectured on Nectar of Devotion. And he said, so if these Mayavadis, they think Jagan Mithya, Brahma Satya, they think this material world is all false, then why are they worried about this false misery? Why are they worried about opening hospitals? Why are they worried about providing water supplies, because according to them everything's false anyway. So they're actually hypocrites. They're coming down because they're not satisfied in their so-called transcendence. And the other thing Srila Prabhupada says is, if someone took you into his garden and he showed you all the beautiful things he'd grown in the garden, so many different flowers, so many fruits and vegetables, and you turn around and said to him, it's all false anyway. Prabhupada said, imagine how depressing it is. And he says, we don't want to depress Krishna. So don't turn around and tell them that all these wonderful... I mean, Krishna created the material world, and there are some wonderful things in the material world. And don't turn around and say it's all false, and you'll depress Krishna. So don't depress Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada is quoting one verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10:2-32, which is in the prayers of the demigods before Lord Krishna appears. Yai nyai ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavad avishuddha buddhayaha aruya krichnena param padam tata patyantyado nadrita yushmad angrayaha. So the translation: some may say that aside from the devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? In answer to this question, the Lord Brahma and the other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerity and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So Prabhupada quotes this verse and parts of this verse very frequently. Avishuddha buddhayaha means the intelligence is not pure. And krichrena means severe penances and austerities. So these Mayavadis, they go through severe penances. But if their goal is not to attain Krishna's lotus feet, they're simply wasting their time. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, aside from the devotees, there are many others, non-devotees, known as karmis, jnanis or yogis, philanthropists, altruists, politicians, impersonalists and voidists. There are many varieties of non-devotees who have their respective ways of liberation, but simply because they do not know the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, although they falsely think that they have been liberated and elevated to the highest position, they fall down. And he quotes Bhagavad-Gita 9.3, Ashradadana Purusha Dharmas yasya parantapa aprapyamam nivartante mrityu samsaravatmani. Those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of foes, but return to birth and death in this material world. If one has no love for the lotus feet of the Lord, one falls down. Okay, so another quote I found is from Renunciation Through Wisdom, which is one of Srila Prabhupada's small books. He explains there that both the karmi and the jnani are interested in sensual pleasure that we discovered before. They both want something for themselves. They're both thinking of themselves as the center, the one who should be enjoying. When the karmi can't enjoy, he renounces material. But a genuine jnani, one who is genuinely looking for Brahman realization, Prabhupada says he is actually very clean, humble, reverent to his guru, and he's actually in the mode of goodness. He simply has faulty knowledge. He doesn't have full knowledge. But he falls to the fault of misrepresenting Aham Brahmasmi. He thinks Aham Brahmasmi means I am Brahman. But Aham Brahmasmi is Krishna talking. I am the source of Brahman, as we have in Bhagavad-Gita 14:26. Brahmanihi pratishtaham. I am the source of that Brahman. So also in Renunciation Through Wisdom, Prabhupada clarifies with the position of the devotee. He says a couple of qualities that stand out for the devotee. One is that the devotee is never bitter. He never experiences bitterness anywhere in the material world, because he sees the whole material world in relation to Krishna. So we would like to come to that stage. We never feel anything is happening wrong to us, because we see it as Krishna is giving us what's good for us through different agents. So we don't have to be envious of anyone. We don't have to be angry with anyone. We don't have to worry about our position or where we're going to stay, if we really are surrendered to Krishna. I have a long way to go. So, and the other thing about the devotee is that he is always unselfish. He's experiencing this knowledge of Krishna, this knowledge of his relationship with Krishna, and he's realizing the process of attaining it, and he wants to share it with others. He is never selfish and says, let me do something for myself. So Prabhupada has explained that while we're engaged in sadhana, we should not pretend to be more liberated than we are. We should not pretend that we can not do anything for ourselves. We're taking up a process of purification, and ultimately we want to come to the stage of doing it for Krishna's pleasure. But of course in the beginning we're doing it partly for our own purification. We're not pure devotees yet. We have to accept that. But at the same time we have to be very careful that we're not doing some things simply for our own benefit. The danger comes when we come to all these benefits of the vrats like Purushottam Vrat and Kartik Vrat. We have to select, and we have to take the guidance of the spiritual master. We had the guidance from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he explained that once we have come to the stage of being initiated, taking shelter of parampara, whatever we choose for our own sadhana should be through the guidance of the senior devotees or the guru. It should not be independently that we find something on Google and think this is good, let's do it. So there's very much a danger of the internet, is because all of this stuff is so readily available. Prabhupada also explains in the Chaitanya Charitamrita how even things like Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sanatana Goswami, Sanatana Goswami says himself at the end of Hari Bhakti Vilas, this is mainly for the rich householders. And Prabhupada is explaining in Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is mainly for in India. He said it was established basically because the smarta brahmanas had their own padati of how to do things, and the Vaishnavas didn't. So Sanatana Goswami established this padati for the Vaishnavas. I went through lots of quotes of Srila Prabhupada. He recommends it to guide us in deity worship, but he doesn't say we should follow everything in it. He's saying we have to take the guidance from our spiritual master. Now we'll come back to this definition of this article I was reading from dandavats.com is explaining Mayavad philosophy and all these deviant philosophies in a way that I found very helpful. He said fanaticism, philanthropy, Mayavad philosophy and Bhog-Tyag cycle are interrelated. When people are frustrated with gross sense gratification and they seek something higher, they cannot avoid being affected by one or more of these unless they become devotees. So either we become a devotee or we get affected by all this deviant philosophy. Bhog means sense gratification and Tyag means renunciation. But this renunciation is a material activity. It's renouncing from material activities. So renunciation itself is also material. One of the most effective strategies of Maya for keeping spiritual seekers entrapped in the illusory energy is to bewilder them so they think material renunciation is a spiritual activity. As long as they have material desires, the conditioned souls are vulnerable to this confusion. It can be avoided simply by accepting the Vedic scripture and Srila Prabhupada instructions, without compromise or misinterpretation. So this definition of, he calls fanatical, is very interesting and needs some meditation. The definition of fanatical is motivated or characterized by an extreme uncritical enthusiasm or zeal, as in religion or politics. So when Prabhupada tells us to read his books, he is very frequently, you'll see if you look up Prabhupada about reading his books, he is saying the book should be studied carefully from all angles of vision. So this means that we actually need to use our intelligence when we're reading these books. We have to be critical. So here the definition of fanatical is uncritical enthusiasm. So somebody who takes something and they just become enthusiastic without understanding it properly. Now, he explains more. Uncritical means that fanatics are enthusiastically contributing to a cause, although they have not fully analyzed its ideology. As they are not enthusiastic about the ideology, it is clear that something else is motivating. So actually, they're not studying the philosophy very deeply. They're not trying to understand it very deeply. They're motivated. And so then the motivation is this bhog-tyag cycle. Because they're frustrated in the material world, they're renouncing. And then they're grabbing hold of some partial philosophy that they're not even studying properly, something that promises what they want. And they're just grabbing it and they're taking it and they're being very enthusiastic, but actually they don't understand it. So this devotee, whose name I will mention, I don't know who he is, his name is Parama Dayal Nityananda Das. So he's talking about how you preach to Mayavadis. So he says this becomes like a merry-go-round. They try to enjoy the material world, they can't. They try to become renunciants, they can't enjoy. So they come back to the material world again. There are, some other things that are very important. He gives a lot of quotes for Prabhupada, we'll try and run through. But he says that the thing we need to understand is that their motivation isn't their philosophy. They're just grabbing hold of something to suit them. Their motivation is actually selfish enjoyment. So they will engage in, even a karmi, he says, will engage in charity or altruistic activities and think themselves very grand and very advanced. And the jnani will engage in his renunciation and think that he is grand. Now, the quote here, according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, however, such karmis and jnanis, while busy with their so-called selflessness, they think they're selfless, are in fact servants of lusty desires. This is quoted from the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.6 by Srila Prabhupada's disciples. This is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Prabhupada says that real philanthropy is to be interested in Krishna's interest, not in material interests. Now, okay, so now he's talking about how to understand a Mayavadi, if you should preach to him and if you shouldn't, and even some other people. So of course Prabhupada started preaching in America. There were lots of so-called yoga societies and everything was happening. He also said that this tyag renunciation is like the hippies who were dissatisfied with their parents' middle-class life in the suburbs, and so they renounced that and instead engaged in illicit sex and drugs in the Bowery. So they gave up one type of sense of gratification, but because of lack of knowledge, they simply engaged in another. Now here this devotee is distinguishing that some people who are engaged in like volunteer work, yoga societies, are actually doing so because they're genuinely seeking. So they will come to Krishna consciousness. In that respect, social service, community service, national service, sacrifice for one's country may be accepted so that someday one may come to the stage of pure devotional service. Bhagavad-Gita 18:46 states, Yata pravitya bhutanam. If one decides to sacrifice for the supreme cause, even if he doesn't know the supreme cause is Krishna, he will gradually come to understand. And then as Suresha was explaining this verse 12:11 yesterday, how one gives up one's activities without knowing for Krishna, but give up the results of one's activities, you can come to the stage of gradual purification. That's what the verses were given there for. Prabhupada explains renunciation through wisdom again. Many sages in the past, like great Sonaka Rishi and self-realized renunciants like the famous Sukadev Goswami, got a taste for knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead after practicing impersonal disciplines. They then relished indescribable bliss by hearing the Lord's transcendental pastimes. So these sages at some time, and also we have the four Kumaras, they were practicing impersonal discipline, but they were not offenders. They were trying to practice properly in personal discipline. And once they got this taste from the devotees or from the Lord, they were relished very much. But their knowledge was not impure, it was just lacking. Okay. So, now there's another, we'll try and summarize this. Becoming a devotee is not a mechanical process. It's not that I take initiation and then I just do this and carry on and do this and automatically I'll become a devotee. Most of us, when we take initiation, we're still very much attached to the spirit of enjoyment. We come to devotional service sometimes for some purpose. Some people come for the lifestyle. Some people come for peace. We're not fully surrendered when we take initiation. Of course, initiation means that. It means the start. It means to initiate the process. So we're not expected to be pure devotees. So it's not that it's automatically we will make progress at a certain rate. We have to put in some effort to get rid of the spirit of enjoyment. But so long as we keep this process and sincerely trying to do it, even though we are faulty, we will be better off than the Gyanis who don't understand where we're supposed to be going. So the other thing that he makes a point of is that not all Mayavadis are completely fixed in their false doctrine. And he cites the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Benares. So the Mayavadi sannyasis were criticizing Mahaprabhu because all he was doing is singing and dancing. He wasn't studying Vedanta. But they invited him to come and meet them. And he sat down in the place where they took their shoes off and washed their feet. And simply by his qualities, by his purity and his effulgence, they looked at him and they thought he was beautiful. And they invited him to come and sit with them. So this devotee is explaining here that, he's actually quoting Srila Prabhupada in the purport, that these Mayavadis, here we are, here's Srila Prabhupada. If by chance the Mayavad sannyasis can earn a little piety and then be graced by a pure Vaishnava devotees, as the Mayavadis of Benares were by Lord Chaitanya, then they can easily realize the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman or Supersoul is incomplete. They can then become enlightened by transcendental knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. he also quotes Srila Prabhupada as saying, the Mayavadis themselves said, we're followers of Shankaracharya, so therefore we've accepted his philosophy, even though it doesn't give us pleasure. It doesn't satisfy us. So, although they were Mayavadis and they were followers of Shankara, they were followers. Okay, here's a summary. The above statements by Srila Prabhupada can be summarized as follows. Those who see the futility of sense gratification may then sacrifice for a good cause or practice yoga without perfect understanding. But if they are sincere, they will accept Krishna when the truth is made available by a pure devotee. Because they do not understand, they are technically speaking fanatical. But this is benign because they sincerely want to understand the truth. Others who perform sacrifice in yoga but are addicted to ultimate fanaticism, the illusion that they are supreme enjoyer, remain in their drunken days, even if they meet Krishna in person. We had some who met Krishna in person. There was the one who thought he was Lord Vishnu and challenged Krishna and asked for Krishna to give him his symbols back, remember? And he threw the Sudarshan chakra and cut off his head. I can't remember who that was. That was somewhere on the battlefield. Now, the other thing that's mentioned in this letter, this article, which is very interesting, is that Shankaracharya himself was very austere. He renounced the material world, means he renounced everything. He took only a wooden water pot and a kopin and nothing else. And he says the modern Shankarites would have him turning in his grave, because what they take as so-called renunciation is nothing. They're not actually renounced. And he said, what about these so-called yogis who are trying to renounce? What about their renunciation? They are still living in the city and enjoying and thinking that they're renunciants. So they're not actually renouncing the material world like Shankara did. Shankara was extremely renounced and very austere. Okay. To achieve an eternal state, we have to give up the desire to be the one and only enjoyer. So this is common amongst the Voidists and the impersonalists and the Mayavadis. They think they have to find this pleasure in the Brahma Sukha. So we have to give up that and put Krishna in and work for Krishna's pleasure. And he says this, what I just said, the austerity performed by modern yoga groups is completely ridiculous. It's impossible to get to mukti by this process. The austerity of Shankaracharya and the traditional impersonalists is very severe. And the modern yoga groups, they just don't know what austerity is. But he again repeats that some of the followers of modern yoga groups are there for good purposes, like vegetarian, meditation, and material goodness. So they can be preached to by our devotees who go and find them and give them knowledge. He makes another point about preaching, is that we have to be sincere preachers. We have to know the philosophy by studying from every angle. We have to stay in the association of devotees, because if we leave ISKCON, the association of devotees, and if we don't know the knowledge thoroughly, then we're simply being swayed by Mayavad itself, and rather than preaching to them, we're becoming Mayavadis. So that's quoted very strongly, how there's a Prabhupada quote there about that as well, if I can find it. Oh yeah, here's Prabhupada's quote. Anyone who is trying to be aloof from this Krishna conscious society and yet engage in Krishna consciousness is living a great hallucination, for this is not possible. So someone who thinks, this is the author again, someone who thinks they can engage in Krishna consciousness but do not understand why they cannot be aloof from ISKCON, they are fanatical. So all of us have to be very careful that we're following the parampara, that we're studying Srila Prabhupada's books very thoroughly, from all angles of vision, and that we remain open to learning new things. Because as soon as we're fixed in thinking that we know better than the parampara, then we're into material thinking. We're into thinking that Maya is higher. We're Mayavadis in the broad definition of the term. So it's very important to remain strict in our adherence to Srila Prabhupada and the parampara. Okay, almost time. Uttama purushastvanya paramatmetyuda hritaha yo lokatrayam avvishya vivarchavyaya ishvaraha. Oh, there was one other verse where it talked about both Uttama Purusha and Paramatma that I didn't mention. Is 13:23. I'll just read that verse as well. Upadrashtanumanta cha Bharata Bhokta Maheshvara Paramatyapya Chapyukto Dehismin Purusha Paraha. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. So this verse earlier in the 13th chapter had also had Paramatma and Purusha Para, the Supreme Person. There are many verses he quoted, but I didn't go through all the quotes. Okay, so anyone have any comments, questions, corrections, or realizations from today's class? Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. You were speaking about that whatever we do, we should consult our spiritual master.
No, I didn't say we had to consult him. We have to go keep in the parampara. Prabhupada also said that you should not go and ask him every single thing. He said you should read my books.
Whatever our books are giving and our knowledge is there, and sometimes so many things whimsically we are doing. So that is correct or not? But sometimes some things are in the shastras and some things are not there, and whimsically we are doing the things. So what do you say about that?
Well, your question is a generalized question. I'm not sure if you're speaking about yourself or if you're trying to speak about others. It's best if you speak about yourself because you don't know the minds of others. I spoke quite a lot in the class today about how we have to be careful. So personally we have to be careful. As I quoted from this article, bhakti is not an automatic process. It's not a mechanical process. It's not that you start and you're going to get back to Godhead. You have to be sincere about your practice and your results. And personally, I try very hard not to criticize others because there was a nice quote that came up from Srila Prabhupada a few weeks ago. Some devotees had seen that a devotee was going astray and they were criticizing him. And then Prabhupada came to know and he says, you don't have the right to do that. Only the spiritual master knows the advancement of devotees. So for us, avoid criticizing anyone else. Speak personally about your own queries, and that will bring the greater realization also. Because if you're just speaking in general terms, you're not going to take the answer to heart. So try to speak something personal and take the answer to heart and make it work for you. That's my suggestion.
Yes, suppose I am doing whatever I want on my own. I read books, I understand so many things, but still so many things I do my own. So what, that's correct or not? I ask.
So Prabhupada has instructed us to read the books, and he has instructed that everything is in his books. We have to take to this process nicely. We have to study from all angles of visions. We have to attend the classes, because if we study only on our own, as Srila Prabhupada said in this quote, if we try and be aloof from the association of devotees, we'll go astray. I mean, there are people who will take the Bhagavad-Gita like they take other things. In this New Age, the idea is you open up a book and you take something, what you like, and you accept it. So we can do this also. The Mayavadis have done it also. All these people commentating on the Bhagavad-Gita have done it. We open it up, we find something we like, and we accept it. Okay, this is my slogan. But if something else we don't like, we'll just turn the page and not go there. So when I first started reading Bhagavad-Gita, someone told me that. Someone told me, you just go through Bhagavad-Gita and you find what you like and you learn those slokas. But then when I met my spiritual master, he told me to come and study Bhakti Shastri. And there were slokas that we were to memorize. Now at the time, I was still a new devotee. I didn't know why I was really memorizing them. There was a lot of theory, but I didn't realize it. But after that, I have realized that what slokas I thought were nice when I was just reading on my own and I studied, they were not really that important. But the slokas that were given as memory verses, I get more and more realization of why I know them, in order to help explain the philosophy to others and also to help understand the philosophy myself. So that's the advantage of studying in the parampara, in the association of devotees, especially in a way like this where we study with the senior devotees as well, and we study in the association of devotees. We can gain so much more. On our own, our mind is the driver, and we will just become like all these other crazy commentators on the Bhagavad-Gita. So we can take this determination and the instruction of Srila Prabhupada and the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada has said so many times, I want you to study my books.
How can I understand Bhagavad-Gita is spoken by Krishna? And how can I understand that something is likely and something is unlikely? When I read, I feel the whole book is completely liking. I cannot say this sloka I don't like, this one I don't like. So I cannot discriminate those things. I just see that it was spoken by Krishna. So everything I understand and realize that things are as Krishna has come to us.
Good. Is there any other comments or questions in the class today? Hare Krishna. Yeah, just hold it to your mouth anyway, because it'll go on the radio even though it's not very loud.
You were talking about Shankaracharya,
Huh.
Mayavad. So it's just a comment. While the society, Sanatana Dharma was a patriotic condition. Shankaracharya appeared and he organized the Sanatana Dharma people. And because of his contribution for thousands of years, now the society is going on in a systematic way. It is organized, and it was not carried away with the attacks of Sainism and Buddhism. Buddhism and Jainism was coming up. It was taking place now. It was establishing rapidly in the Indian society. So to stop the advancement of the dharmas, Dharmis and all, Shankaracharya appeared and he established his pithas and then organized the society. So I feel his contribution.
No, his contribution is not minimized. If you read Prabhupada's teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he explains it very nicely. So there was all this adharma going on in the name of religion. So Lord Buddha came. Lord Buddha preached ahimsa, and he preached against the Vedas, because the Vedas were so much being applied corruptly that he couldn't correct that himself. So he preached against the Vedas, and he preached a simple message, ahimsa. So then Lord Shankara, he's an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and he came. It's described in the Puranas. He says to Mother Parvati, I'm going to come in the guise of a Brahmana, and I'm going to bewilder the atheists. So it's there, it's accepted by our parampara. So his role was to establish the Vedas again, but he did so in an impersonal way. Actually, he was a covered Buddhist, he was a covered Voidist, in what he was teaching. But of course he wasn't, because he did this Govindam Madhuramata. Govindam is the supreme. I'm not an expert on the philosophy, but I know he himself is not the offender. Those who are Shankarites are the offenders. And so he gave, as I said in the class, he was very strict in his renunciation. But his so-called followers, they are so-called followers. They are not real followers. And also, in his later teachings, he accepted the Supreme Personality as higher than the Brahman. But it was a process. And so after Shankara, then other like Madhva came and Ramanuja came. They established dualism, separation between God and the living entities, and then special Advaita, Visishta Advaita, and all this, of which I'm not really a philosopher, so I can't explain everything. And then of course Lord Chaitanya came. So prior to Lord Chaitanya, there were 4 authorized sampradayas. There was Sampradaya, Brahma Madhva Sampradaya. There was Sri Sampradaya. There was the Kumara Sampradaya. And what's the other one? Huh? Rudra Sampradaya. Yes, he was there. So these 4 authorized sampradayas were there. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya, but he took 2 important teachings from each of the 4 sampradaya, and he brought it down in a special way. So before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the highest that people could aspire for is the service of Lakshmi Narayan, which is service in awe and reverence. So what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come, that's very special. He's brought the teachings of all 4 authorized sampradayas together, and he's teaching the highest love, which is Goloka Vrindavan Prem love. So he's very special. But as you said, Shankaracharya had his purpose. In the society that he was in, he came for a purpose. Buddha had a purpose. Even he was preaching against the Vedas. He was an incarnation of Krishna. And still he was preaching against the Vedas, but he had a purpose. The same way the different acharyas come. Even Prabhupada has explained you can accept the same in the Christian religion, that when Jesus Christ came, he preached also very simple, like Buddha did. He threw out all the animal sacrifices in the synagogues. They had the same problem. Their philosophy was being misrepresented in a dharmic way. So he threw out all the people who were trading in the synagogues and the sacrificing animals. And he preached very simple, love of God. And he's quoted in somewhere, I'm not a study of the Bible either, but he's quoted somewhere of saying, there is much more that I could tell you, but I can't. Because as each empowered preacher comes, they can only preach to the readiness of their audience. So we're very lucky to come in the line from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who gives us the opportunity of this highest goal of love of Godhead. And the process is very simple. Only we have to become fixed in it, and become fixed in sincerely following the spiritual master, to the extent that nothing else matters. That much we can be fixed, and then the process is simple. Of course, it's not simple to get to that place, but the process itself is simple. Thank you.